Humanity has not only left the confines of Earth, but that of the Sol system, and is expanding into the larger universe. As it does this, it has established an interstellar empire, claiming worlds and bringing them into its domain. This can be seen with planets such as Arrakis and Ix. Greetings and welcome back to Checkpoint Gaming, Dune Imperium. With this episode, we will be going over the expansions to the game. First, we'll be looking at Rise of Ix. With the components that come with this expansion, it consists of the CHOAM board overlay, the Ix board, 4 conflict cards, 17 intrigue cards, 18 tech tiles, 35 Imperium deck cards, 6 leaders, and 4 snooper tokens which are to be used with the Tessia Vernius leader. With each player color, this expansion provides 2 dreadnoughts and an additional disc which represents the freighter token. Regarding the additional conflict cards, they consist of 2 conflict 1 cards, 1 conflict 2 card, and 1 conflict 3 card. And if the players choose to play the Epic Game variant, then the single starting card of Control the Spice is to be incorporated into the game. When combining this expansion with the base game, a few modifying steps need to be performed. First, place the CHOAM overlay atop the upper right corner of the main board, covering its Landsrod and CHOAM sections. Second, place the Ix board near the main board. Third, shuffle the 18 tech tiles face down, followed by dividing it into 3 stacks of 6 tiles each. They are then to be placed onto the Ix board, followed by flipping the top tile of each stack face up. Fourth, add the new conflict cards to the main game deck. Although the draw pool is larger, the conflict deck is still to consist of 1 conflict 1 card on top, 5 conflict 2 cards in the middle, and 4 conflict 3 cards on the bottom, with all unselected conflict cards being returned to the box. Fifth, shuffle the 17 intrigue cards into the main intrigue deck, followed by shuffling in the 35 Imperium cards into the main Imperium deck before creating the Imperium row. Sixth, combine the new leaders with the leaders from the base game and allowing the players to select from this new leader pile. And seventh, when the players are selecting their respective color, they're to claim the corresponding dreadnoughts, which are to be placed into their given supply, followed by placing the new disc on the bottom space of the shipping track. With the 18 tech tiles found in this expansion, it provides the players access to Ixian technology. When it comes to the anatomy of the tech tiles, it looks like this. With the tile's spice cost, it is found in the upper left-hand corner of the tile. With the tile's name, it is found on the top of the tile, right next to the spice cost. With the tile's acquire effect, it is found on the left-hand side of the tile as well as being mid-tile. With that said, the player will gain this effect only once when they first acquire said tile. It is worth noting that not all tiles have an acquire effect. With the tech's ability, it is found in the center of the tile. Finally, with the rival tech indicator, it is found in the lower right-hand corner of the tile, and it indicates that a rival in a solo game is able to acquire it. With the acquisition of a tech tile, it can only be done through the use of the Acquire Tech icon. Whenever the Acquire Tech icon is triggered, the triggering player can acquire one of the face-up tech tile found upon the Ix board, with no limit to the number of tech tiles any given player is able to acquire. With the acquisition of a tech tile, it can be any of the face-up tiles found atop of each of the tech stacks, with the player paying the listed spice cost, then placing it into their supply, face-up, so that everyone can see. Once obtained, the next tile in the stack is to be turned face-up. But if any of the stacks run out of tiles, then the players are to rely upon whatever tile stacks are remaining. When it comes to that of the spice cost for a tech tile, there are 2 means of reducing it. But with that said, it can never be reduced to less than 0. The 2 means of reducing the price of a tech tile is through tech discounts and tech negotiation. With tech discounts, whenever the Acquire Tech icons comes with a -1 or -2 spice icon in the corner, then it will cause the cost of that single purchase to be reduced by that amount of spice. With that said, the player is unable to combine this discount with more than 1 icon. So basically, it's 1 per customer. With tech negotiation, whenever the player triggers this given icon, they can send one of their troops as a negotiator to the Ix board, being placed upon the banner found to the left of the tech tiles. But if the player has no troops, then nothing will happen. With the paying off of the tech negotiation, it is done when using the Acquire Tech icon, which will allow the player's negotiators to be returned to the player's supply. For each negotiator that is returned to the supply, the price of the tech tile is to be reduced by 1 spice. With that said, the player is able to combine this discount with a tech discount. With the use of tech tiles, they possess a variety of abilities that come into play at different times during the game. If an ability possesses the flip icon, it can be used during one of the player's agent turns as well as only being used once per round. When this occurs, said tech tile is to be flipped face down as a means of indicating that it has been used. At the beginning of the next round, flipped tech tiles are to be turned face up to indicate that they can be used again. When it comes to that of the freighter token, it is found upon the shipping track of the CHOAM board overlay. And when the freighter icon is triggered, the player can move their freighter in one of two ways. The first option is to have the player advance their given freighter one space upon the shipping track. With that said, the player can't choose this option if their given freighter is already found at the top space. The second option is to have the player recall their freighter back to the bottom of the shipping track. If they do this, then they will collect all of the shipping rewards that are associated with their freighter's current space, along with each space found below it. When a player is recalling their given freighter, they are able to claim their rewards in any order they desire. With the rewards for each space found upon the shipping track, they consist of the following. The top space allows the player to collect a tech tile with a tech discount of 2 spice being applied. The middle space allows the player to recruit 2 troops as well as to gain 1 influence with any one of the 4 factions, and the bottom space allows the player to gain 5 solari with each of their opponents collecting 1 solari or gaining 2 spice. With the bottom space, the opponents will have to select one or the other, not both. With dreadnoughts, they are a new unit type introduced in this expansion, and they are commissioned through the triggering of the dreadnought icon, with 1 dreadnought being summoned with each triggering. When summoned, the player is to take it from their supply and place it into their garrison. If a dreadnought is commissioned while sending an agent to that of a combat space, the player can deploy said dreadnought into the given conflict. With that said, each player can only commission 2 dreadnoughts at a time, so if a player deployed both of their dreadnoughts, they can't commission anymore. With the nature of the dreadnoughts, they come with 3 distinct advantages. First is that they're powerful, as seen with the fact that each dreadnought found in a conflict possesses 3 strength, which exists even if the player doesn't have any troops found in the conflict. Any drawn swords also count towards the conflict, with combat intrigue cards also allowed to be used. Second is that they're durable. When resolving combat, the player's dreadnoughts found in the conflict aren't returned to their supply. If the player didn't win the conflict, then their dreadnoughts are to be returned to the player's garrison. And third is that they are able to control locations found on Arrakis. If the player wins a conflict that has at least one of their dreadnoughts, then they are to take control of 1 board space until the end of the following combat phase. Due to the introduction of dreadnoughts into the game, the term unit in the confines of this expansion includes both troops and dreadnoughts, thus causing the new cards to refer to units in a general sense or specifically to a given unit type. And when it comes to that of all of the cards that are found in the base game, when they refer to troops, it won't affect that of dreadnoughts. On top of that, the rules for the deployment of troops to a conflict when it comes to the original rulebook have been updated to use the term unit instead of troop to reflect the use of dreadnoughts. So both troops and dreadnoughts can be deployed during a conflict. With the controlling of a location on a board, a dreadnought can control any of the 3 board spaces that possess a control marker. If the player wins a conflict where they have at least 1 dreadnought in the fight, then the player will have to choose one of these spaces where a dreadnought hasn't already been placed, causing the dreadnought to be placed onto the flag found below the space, covering any control marker that might be there. And if the second dreadnought was in the conflict as well, then it's to be returned to the player's garrison. While a player has a dreadnought found at a given location, they will gain any bonus that would normally go to the owner of the given control marker. This consists of 1 solari for Arakeen or Carthag, 1 spice for that of the Imperial Basin, and 1 troop if a conflict card has it listed as a defense bonus. From there, the dreadnought is to be returned to the player's garrison, with control of the location being returned to the owner of any control marker the player's dreadnought might have been covering up. With all of that addressed, there is an optional variant to Rise of Ix, which will make it longer and increasing its intensity, which is known as an epic game. The objective of the epic game is to score 12 victory points instead of 10, and with all changes that are to be done occurring during setup. First, don't use any Conflict 1 cards when constructing the Conflict deck. Instead, 5 randomly selected Conflict 2 cards and 5 randomly selected Conflict 3 cards are to be used with the Conflict 2 cards placed on top of the Conflict 3 cards. Second, each player is to remove a copy of Dune, the desert planet, from their starting deck and replace it with a copy of Control the Spice. Third, each player is to draw an intrigue card. If a player selected Viscount Hundro Moritani as their leader, then they should wait until all of the other players have drawn their intrigue card. Once that is done, the intelligence ability is able to be used. And fourth, each player will begin the game with 5 troops within their given garrison. If being combined with Uprising, it's to be incorporated in the following manner. During setup, the CHOAM board overlay is to be folded in half, covering only the top right corner of the Uprising board. Since Rise of Ix was released before that of Uprising, the CHOAM board overlay and the X board are without observation posts, so the players should play as if there is an observation post found connecting interstellar shipping and smuggling, while another observation post is found connecting tech negotiation and dreadnought. It is recommended that the Rise of Ix conflict cards aren't added to the Uprising conflict cards. But with that said, players can add them if they so choose, but it will make the matching of battle icons a bit harder. But if playing the Epic Game Mode, one additional Conflict 3 card will need to be added with Economic Supremacy being recommended. And if using Elisa Ikaz, it requires the fold space cards from the base game to be included, with Elisa Ikaz being the only leader allowed to obtain them. Second, we'll be looking at Immortality. With the components that come with this expansion, it consists of the Research Station overlay, the Beneteliax board, 15 Intrigue cards, 30 Imperium deck cards, 18 Teliaxu deck cards where their backs are identical to that of the Imperium cards, and 1 reserve card which is used for the reclaiming of forces. When it comes to that of the player components, they consist of, and each player getting, the following: a Family Atomics token, 2 starting cards which are entitled Experimentation, and 2 discs with one to be used for the research track and the other used for the Tleilaxu track. When it comes to that of setting up with the base game, a few modifying steps need to be performed. First, shuffle the 30 additional Imperium cards into the Imperium deck before creating the Imperium row. Second, create the Tleilaxu row, which is to be placed above the Imperium row. From there, place the Reclaimed Forces card to the left of the Bene Tleilax board. The Tleilaxu deck is then to be shuffled, followed by placing it face down above the Imperium deck, with 2 cards being dealt face up next to the Reclaimed Forces. Third, place the Bene Tleilax board close to the Imperium row and reserve cards. But with that said, the Bene Tleilax board and the Tleilaxu row can be placed elsewhere on the play area based on the situation at hand. In either case, it is recommended that the Imperium and Tleilaxu rows be kept close together. From there, place 2 spice from the bank onto the 4th space upon the Tleilaxu track, with each player then placing their 2 new discs onto the Bene Tleilax board, one on the leftmost space of the Tleilaxu track and the other on the research token in the leftmost space of the research track. Fourth, place the Research Station overlay atop of the Research Station space found upon the game board. Fifth, each player is to remove the 2 copies of Dune, the desert planet, from their starter deck and replace them with their 2 copies of Experimentation. And sixth, shuffle the 15 Intrigue cards into the Intrigue deck. When it comes to that of the Bene Tleilax board, it tracks the relationship each player has with Tleilaxu, and it does so in 2 ways, through the research track and through the Tleilaxu track. With the research track, it charts the scientific gains each house possesses due to their involvement with the Tleilaxu. So whenever a player triggers the research icon, they are to advance their given research token 1 space rightward along the research track. There are also times when the player will have to make a decision on which branch of the track they wish to go down. With that said, the player can never move up, down, or left along the track. When a player advances along the research track, they will immediately gain the bonus listed in the new space. With genetic markers, they represent significant technological breakthroughs the player unlocks as they advance their given token. When a player's research token reaches a column that has a genetic marker found at its bottom, said player will gain the effects found on the cards marked with said icon due to them being active, which lasts for the rest of the game. When it comes to some of these effects, they work with just 1 genetic marker, while others require 2 research markers at the end of the research track for it to come into effect. In addition to this, once the player reaches the first genetic marker, the player has the option of placing the Tleilaxu cards that they have acquired atop of their deck for the remainder of the game. and once the player reaches the second genetic marker, they cause the research icon to no longer advance their given research token. This lasts for the rest of the game, causing said player to draw a card instead when the situation calls for it. With the Tleilaxu track, it represents the player embracing the most illicit creations that the Tleilaxu have to offer. So whenever the player gains a Tleilaxu icon, they are to advance their given Tleilaxu token a single space upon the Tleilaxu track. Whenever the player's Tleilaxu token reaches a space that has a bonus associated with it, they will gain said bonus immediately. With that said, each player will gain a victory point whenever they reach this given space. On top of this, the first player who reaches the bonus space will take an additional bonus, which consists of 2 spice, which was placed onto said space during setup. When it comes to that of the unique creations of the Bene Tleilax, they are represented by the Tleilaxu cards, which are very similar to that of the Imperium cards, as seen with them being acquired by the player during the reveal turn and placed into the discard pile so that they can be shuffled into their deck at a later time. When they are played, it is done during the agent turn or get revealed during the reveal turn. With that said, the Tleilaxu cards only come from the Tleilaxu row and are purchased through that of specimens instead of persuasion. Whenever a specimen icon appears on either a card or board space, the player is to generate 1 specimen, which is represented by the player taking a troop from their supply and placing it into the axolotl tanks found upon the Tleilaxu board. The player is then able to spend these specimens in order to either acquire a Tleilaxu card from the Tleilaxu row or to pay for an effect using the specimen cost found upon one of their given cards. Whenever a player spends one of their specimens, it gets sent back to their supply. With that said, the player can return any number of their specimens back to their supply anytime they like, which can be useful if said player needs to recruit troops for a conflict but don't have any more found within their supply. With the Tleilaxu row, it will always possess 2 cards within it, plus the Reclaimed Forces card. Whenever it doesn't have enough cards, they are to be replaced from the top of the Tleilaxu deck, with the Reclaimed Forces card never being removed. But when the player acquires the Reclaimed Forces card, they get to choose one of its listed effects, that of recruiting 2 troops, or to advance their Tleilaxu token a single space upon the Tleilaxu track. Players are also unable to acquire Tleilaxu cards by using the effects that are used to acquire cards from the Imperium row. Since the Tleilaxu cards are unable to be purchased using persuasion, players aren't allowed to acquire them using the effects that refer to or that modify a persuasion cost. With some of the new cards that are introduced by this expansion, they have a modified agent box that comes with a special background, along with the word graft above it. With these cards, they are able to be combined with other cards found in the player's hand in order to allow them to engage in plays that are otherwise not allowed to occur. These effects consist of the following. First, when the player plays a card with graft on it during the agent turn, they are unable to play it alone, requiring them to play 2 cards, and only 2 cards, during said turn. Second, both cards are considered to have sent the agent, regardless of the card icons that the player uses. Third, the player can either play 2 cards that have graft on it or 1 card that has graft on it and 1 without. Fourth, the player can use an agent icon from either card to send their agent to a board space. Fifth, the player will gain the effects of both cards in addition to the effects associated with the board space, and the player can select the effect results in any order they wish. And sixth, the graft cards can be revealed as usual during the reveal turn in order to trigger the effects found in their reveal boxes. When a player plays a pair of graft cards, then both cards are considered to have been grafted together. Some cards also have the phrase, "if grafted," printed on them, which causes additional effects to be triggered. When a card has the text that refers to the other grafted card, then it refers to the card that the initial card is grafted to. With the Family Atomics token, it allows the player to spend it during their turn in order to discard all of the cards found in the Imperium row and deal out a new row. But with that said, the player can only do this once per game, with the Family Atomics token being returned to the box once it has been spent. When it comes to the Immortality expansion, it comes with some variations to it. The first variant is that of it being combined with the epic game mode of Rise of Ix. If playing this variant, the Control the Spice card is not to replace any of the 10 starting cards. Instead, each player is to place their Control the Spice card into their given discard pile at the start of the game. The second variant is to add the new deck building options for the players to explore. With groups that are playing this version of the game, it is suggested that they play to 11 victory points, and if playing a 4-player game, then their tokens are to be placed at 0 with the players playing to 10 victory points. And if being combined with Uprising, the research station should still be covered up with the research station overlay. And third, we'll be looking at the CHOAM module. This expansion is actually a mini expansion that comes with Uprising, is meant to be played with said variant, and it is recommended that players get a few games under their belt before implementing this given expansion. When it comes to that of setting up, the following additions and modifications are to be made. First, shuffle the 20 contracts face down, followed by flipping 2 of them face up. From there, place the face-up contracts upon the marked spaces of the board beneath the Landsrod Council. With the remaining 18 contracts, place them face down within the bank. Second, shuffle the 4 additional intrigue cards into the main intrigue deck. Third, shuffle the 4 additional Imperium cards into the main Imperium deck. And fourth, CHOAM Carino. The fourth becomes an option as a selected leader. With the additional components, they consist of 4 Imperium cards, 4 Intrigue cards, CHOAM Carino the fourth, and 20 contract tokens. With the Imperium and Intrigue cards, they come with a new icon printed on them that consists of a red circle with a black center. If playing without the CHOAM module, the contract icon means that the player will gain 2 Solari as indicated by the board. But if playing with the CHOAM module, the contract icon means that the player is able to take one of the 2 face-up contracts found on the board and place them into their given supply. After taking one of the contracts, it is to be replaced with one from the bank, seeing it be flipped face-up. But if all of the contracts have been claimed by the players, then the icon is to revert back to giving the player 2 Solari. With the taking on of contracts, they represent the player making a promise to the CHOAM Corporation to fulfill a given service. Only when the player completes a contract can they receive their given payment, which makes sense, payment owed for services rendered. With most contracts, they name a specific board space that requires the player to send one of their agents to it in order to complete it. With the harvest contract, it requires the player to send one of their agents to a maker board space and obtain a certain amount of spice as shown during that given turn in order to complete it. And this is the total collected spice, including sources other than the space itself. When it comes to that of the immediate contract, it is completed as soon as the player claims it. And with the Acquire the Spice Must Flow contract, it is completed once the player next acquires said card. Once a player completes one of their contracts, they are to announce that they did so, gain the listed reward, and then flip it face down. Since some cards refer to that of completed contracts, any contracts the player completes are to be left within their given supply. If a player takes a contract that sees a board space that already seen the player send one of their agents that turn, then said player will have to wait for a future turn to complete said contract. So basically speaking, the player needs the contract first before they can complete it. With all of that said, the CHOAM module is able to be played with the Rise of Ix, which adds 10 contracts to the game. These contracts possess a different back, are limited to the Rise of Ix, and are used as a means of compensation, as well as to jumpstart the completion of contracts. The Rise of Ix expansion also sees one of the locations connected with that of the Uprising board be replaced where the player is able to claim a new contract. Once the 20 standard contracts have been set up, shuffle the 10 contracts that come with Rise of Ix and give 2 of them to each player. Each player is to look at them, decide which contract they wish to start the game with, and reveal them simultaneously, which is done by placing said contract face up in their given supply. From there, return all of the unchosen Rise of Ix contracts to the box. So with that said, that is what you need to know about how to go about the expansions to the game Dune, Imperium. With that taken care of, we can start talking the solo, 2-player, and 6-player versions of the game. If you like this episode, feel free to give it a like. And if you want to stay up to date on any future episodes we upload, go ahead and subscribe. You can also support us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/checkpointgaming. See you in the next episode, and happy gaming.